It's time to say very good morning and welcome to Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK. Jason, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in this morning. So I should move the fizz corks from my side. It's a bit of a chaotic start this morning.
You're having a good time before I got here, I think.
Yeah, well, got to prepare myself for that paper review. It's and there's one way to do it, and that's with a bit of English fizz. Delicious. Now, before we get to the stories that you've picked out, or indeed our uplifting news story of the day, I need to just run through the front pages. Oh, let's start with the Financial Times. Amazon to stop taking Visa credit cards as battle intensifies over fees. I mean, I'm sort of fascinated that Amazon... I mean, who's bigger here? Amazon or Visa?
It's unclear, isn't it? And we'll have to see what happens with this battle. This is the kind of thing that, as a consumer, perhaps I'm an ignorant consumer, but I wasn't really aware of this kind of issue that Amazon faces with these Visa fees being through the roof.
But everybody faces this. If you run a small business, you will know that every credit card company charges you a fee. They all charge slightly different fees. So it means that this is why cash is king.
Well, it's good to see competition in the marketplace. They're cracking down. I think it's just on Visa credit cards, so you're still okay with Visa debit cards. But then if you're using other credit cards, MasterCard credit cards, presumably providers will have to switch over now.
But I think you can still use Amex, which surprises me that, I think Amex charge bigger fees than Visa or MasterCard.
We'll have to see what happens. Amazon is one of those tech behemoths that it's unclear where the limit of their power lies, and perhaps they're just testing the waters a little bit, seeing how far they can push it, seeing what they can do.
Meanwhile, in cell-late Britain, this is a story we'll talk about in a minute, where 9 activists locked up for Christmas is front page of the Metro. Prime Minister under siege from own party. This is the story that seems to be on many of the front pages this morning. So this is this kind of astonishing... a sort of commentary, really, which I suppose is perhaps summed up best in the Daily Telegraph. I crashed the car over Patterson amidst Prime Minister. I mean, finally we got an admission that he made a mistake. Finally we have an apology of sorts that this was a very, very grave issue and has caused him considerable problems over the last 2 weeks, completely of his own making. Another thing of the Prime Minister's own making. This was so unnecessary. And yet he's done it to himself. Is this somebody imploding because he hasn't got anybody in his shoulder advising him? Is this somebody that can't see the difference between right and wrong? Is it somebody who's slow to act because if he'd done this 2 weeks ago, it might have solved him a lot of problems? Or do we blame Boris for the fact that this is a train wreck?
He's got a huge amount of voices shouting at him from all different directions, and he made completely the wrong call here. As you say, we've been waiting a long time for an apology, and we finally got one. The problem is the apology was given not to the public, but to the 1922 committee of backbench Conservative MPs who were unhappy about proposed changes to the sleaze rules in the wake of all this. They were complaining about the fact that they might have to keep timesheets, as they put it, with their limitations.
Timesheets, by the way, having used them in the past, are the devil's own mechanism for working out who's doing what.
Well, they're not the people who need the apology off the back of this.
Okay, so what I don't understand is, why did it take the Prime Minister so long to apologise? That's the damaging point. And the second point is, why on earth did Owen Paterson think that he wasn't doing anything wrong?
Why it took so long to apologise is because Boris Johnson doesn't like apologising naturally. With the politician class, he doesn't like admitting fault, and so he was going to wait until the very last minute. And we've seen today with the apology he's given yesterday, it was to his MPs, to the people who potentially can remove him from office, not so much to the public. There's still a lot of disdain going on, I think, there. As for Owen Paterson, I think this is it's becoming clearer just how commonplace this attitude is, that Conservative MPs think or MPs more generally, think they have the right to rake in huge amounts of money from the private sector, a cynic would say, exploiting their power, exploiting their position, especially if they're former government ministers, to lobby on behalf of private companies. And it does feel, on the one hand, like we're coming towards a reckoning, that something has to give on this, but on the other hand, we said the same thing after the David Cameron Greensill crisis, and there weren't any substantial changes to the rules there. It looks like we're not going to get many substantial changes to the rules this time round either. Quite
interesting about David Cameron that he's already given up his role as chair of the advisory board of Affinity, which is quite quick off the back of various noises coming out of congressional hearings that I think have surprised everybody, including those at Affinity. So we'll have to see what happens there. Meanwhile, the Queen, on the front page of today's Daily Telegraph, back on duty, it said, I mean, she's almost like in camouflage with her sofas and chairs there. I mean, what a floral outfit she's got on. But I think it was put out there just to make sure that we all realise that she's not gone yet.
Yes, yeah, there's a huge difference, isn't there, between someone of the Queen's age being not quite feeling up to one of her engagements and being on the verge of passing away. There's a huge difference between those two things, and so it's natural that we panic a little bit when she has to cancel engagements. Of course, she cancelled her appearance at the Remembrance Day service over the weekend, but this is just reassuring everyone that she's completely fine. She appeared without a walking stick. She seemed very well indeed.
The Sun focuses on Jack Grealish. I'm Jack's other woman, says Love Island winner Amber. I mean, 1 comes along fine, 2 interesting, 3 it's looking like a bit of a car crash here. He's going to have to make some decisions, isn't he?
He's a busy boy, isn't he, Jack? He's got these 3 women on the go in addition to his career as a star footballer. It was just a few days ago that The Sun had the exclusive about girl number 2, Emily Atack, the I'm a Celebrity and the In-Betweeners star, and now we've got Love Island star Amber Gill, I think her name is. And yeah, he's going to have to make some decisions. And at some point,
his original girlfriend, Sasha Atwood.
Yeah, a lot of unhappiness going on there, I think.
Well, exactly. Daily Express. Boris, it's been a car crash on Sleaze, he says. Daily Mail has a picture of Andrew Pearce, how he got his six-pack by doing nothing. It's an interesting story.
It is an interesting story. I'm not sure about the scientific basis behind this one. I've been testing it out personally for about 20 years and it hasn't quite worked out.
No, it clearly hasn't. I'd ask for your money back if I were you. Meanwhile, we will be talking about Meghan. She's on the front page. Great. But also the inflation shock. The Times newspaper focuses on migrants to be held in Albania. I've crashed the car into a ditch, admits Johnson, is also on the front page. Apparently, according to The Guardian, working people got us. This is Paul McCartney on the Beatles. I mean, apparently, if you're middle or upper class, you can't listen to the Beatles, it would appear. Meanwhile, the Daily Star, oh dear, how sad, never mind. They talk about the crusties, as in the insulate Britain people who have been jailed. And someone's blown me up is the headline on the front page of today's Daily Mirror. Now, I can sense your excitement, Jason, because now we can do what can only be described as today's uplifting news story of the day. He says. Listen, it's almost as if somebody else has been quaffing the fizz from behind the scenes. I have no idea what's going on. Are we doing it now or are we going to do it later? Oh, as it. I mean, defies comprehension what's going on there, Jason. I think he's just trying to tell me that this is a fairly poor story, and frankly, maybe it shouldn't be uplifting because it's not. Hoard the one about hanging on to our junk, says the headline. Brits cling on to unwanted stuff. We are a nation of hoarders, with millions unable to throw away unwanted possessions, researchers found. Nearly half keep everything from old pots of paint to pens that don't work, chipped crockery in the hope that one day they'll be useful. A poll of 2,000 adults found that a quarter refused to part with old phone chargers, broken furniture and unworn jewellery. What is the top of the clutter list, Jason?
Top of the clutter list?
Yeah.
Greetings cards? Old greetings cards?
No, incorrect. Yeah? Incorrect. Number 1 is never worn clothes. Clothes that no longer fit. This is described, I've recently been writing in the Financial Times about my dietary efforts, in which I described my thin drobe and my fat drobe. And the fat drobe is now getting filled up with stuff, and hopefully in the spare room, so I won't have to use it. Old mobile phones, dog-eared books, old phone chargers, old bills, and unloved jewellery are all on the clutter list. I can sense your excitement. Right, Jason, we turn to your stories in just a few moments' time here on Talk Radio. Going through the papers with Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK. So, Jason, let's turn our attention to the stories. Now, under usual circumstances, I think this story will be far bigger. It's sort of picked up on the front page of the Daily Mail, which is about this cost of living explosion. Do you think that we need to be concerned about inflation and what's about to happen to it?
I think we do need to be concerned, but there doesn't seem to be a good solution to it. It doesn't bring all kinds of other costs as well. When you look at the numbers, they're very concerning indeed. Inflation is up to 4.2%, which is up from 3.1% last month, more than double the target of 2%.
Exactly. So the target is that for a growing economy, the Bank of England for many years has said, if you have a growth rate of, or an inflation rate of 2%, and growth at somewhere between 1% and 3%, then that's kind of in balance. Because I suppose what people don't necessarily understand, having some inflation is good, because that means that there's supply and demand side sort of growth and imbalance and all that. But it needs to be in check. If you have rampant inflation, then that means that the money in your pocket goes less far.
Exactly, yeah, and the experts are predicting that inflation is only going to keep on rising. They reckon that by April next year we'll hit 5%. The last time that happened was in October 2011, 10 years ago. So it's the worst. Inflation's the worst it's been in a long, long time, and we're already seeing the effects of that with all kinds of things going up in price, from energy and fuel to food and drinks.
I suppose
more.
The big ticker on this will be if inflation rates have to go up, then not only does that completely wreck the government's finances, which is arguably why they're dragging their feet, even though apparently the Bank of England is independent, although they know that government finances will be absolutely stuffed, even by a small interest rate rise.
Yeah, the Treasury's been scrambling already to bring in extra cash. Obviously, everything is up in the air as a result of COVID. Anyway, paying for the furlough scheme, we've had the national insurance rise, which Rishi Sunak was, of course, earlier this year at pains to stress that the Conservative Party is still the party of low taxes, just not right now, soon maybe.
How serious is this, though? Because I'm assuming that if inflation becomes more than a temporary blip and people genuinely see a reduction in their living standards, that's not going to play well to, again, Boris's key audience, which is the people who might normally vote Labour.
It's not exactly right, and when we get to the next election, it'll be the first time that the red wall, or the new blue wall, is being tested in its strength, and messaging is going to be key. Perhaps Boris Johnson will then regret the departure of Dominic Cummings, supposedly the communications chief, because he's going to have a very difficult message to communicate if this situation continues.
How much of his mess is driven, in your mind, by a lack of an ability to communicate effectively and clearly?
I think almost 100% of it is a misunderstanding of what the public want and how to give it to them and how to tell them that you're giving them what they want.
Because I don't understand. You see, my reading of the public is people want to improve their standards of living. They want to have strong leadership. They want to deal with things like the migrant crisis, which we will come on to. They want to have a strong position on the world stage, and they want somebody that they can trust and believe in. And the problem is that Boris Johnson seems to be moving with the wind. He says one thing and does another. Some of the things that they've done on the COVID strategy have been very well executed, but many of them haven't been. And also, he could have played a blinder by saying, I really want you to take the vaccine because X, Y, Z, really clear. But I'll respect your decision if you choose not to, because we have freedom of decision in this country. It really wouldn't have been a difficult message to get across.
Boris Johnson seems to have this amazing ability to make the worst possible decision at every turn. And it's becoming clearer and clearer that he's been a prime minister in waiting for such a long time, that he's been playing politics for a long time in easy mode, I think. And he's struggling now. Now that he's free of the Brexit train that carried him with a great deal of momentum through
maybe
the election victory.
That's the case. Now let's talk about the Times. Migrants to be held in Albania. I mean, this is a pretty serious story where, you know, it kind of plays to everything that's wrong with the EU.
This is an incredible story. Supposedly the government has been in negotiations with all kinds of countries trying to work out some sort of deal for holding migrants there, and they've all fallen through. They're keen to stress that these talks with Albania are in early stages, but they're the most optimistic so far. The most eye-catching part of this story for me is that the plan is going to cost £100,000 per asylum seeker. Where's all that money going? How much does it cost?
So are we, in order to avoid people coming here, we are paying another nation state to say, you hold these people?
Yeah, after all the money we gave to France, we're now going to give spend a huge amount more on keeping them somewhere else, supposedly as a deterrent. We've resorted to keeping migrants who have already crossed the channel for a long time somewhere else in the hope that that will deter others from crossing. Although I think if they're at the point where they're already willing to clamber into those rickety, unsafe boats to cross the channel, I'm not sure a bit of bureaucracy is going to put them off at this point.
No, it sounds like an absolute mess. Do we know enough about what's going on behind the scenes with politics and politicians and where our taxpayers' funds are going?
I think we could do with learning a bit more about how our money is spent. At the same time, for the sake of our sanity, there should be a limit on how much of this stuff that we have to live through with, the French government is far too busy.
But I think what people will be really cross about is we all get that there are certain services which are under pressure, whether they be the Border Force or whether it be the NHS or anything else. What the taxpayer seems to get very cross about, though, is when our money is spent badly. And it seems very clear that our money is being hosed at various situations and people in a way that seems not to be very effective.
This is it's a worrying trend in British politics, this trend of trying to solve problems by throwing money at it, as you say. And you can see it with everything from migrant crossings to healthcare. You just throw more money at it and hope that the problem goes away. But of course, it doesn't work.
Does, exactly. Now, let's talk about Insulate Britain. They are on the front page of the Star newspaper, but also in the Sun. What's happened to them?
What's happened is a great deal of them have been sentenced to prison.
Excellent.
9 of them specifically have been given either 4 or 6 months in prison. There was a hilarious story yesterday with one of them speaking to journalists outside the High Court before the hearing, saying that he was, quote, crapping himself about having to face the consequences of his actions. They all seem very, very surprised by what's happened, which is a little bit baffling because it was very clear this is what was going to happen when they broke the injunction. They make Extinction Rebellion look professional by comparison because at least they had those trainings where they tell you here's what to do if you get arrested and we're ready to go down for our cause and so on. These guys, they just said you can't issue an injunction on the planet and then left it at that. And were then surprised when they ended up in front of the High Court.
Whoever's been advising them has done a pretty bad job. And I think the other thing is that even those who support that kind of measure or support certainly discussions about the climate have been really quite negative about the things that they've done. And in particular, I think if you're going to hold up a road which has got an ambulance on it and that person is in any way incapacitated or as a result of your actions, and then to come up with a thing saying, you know, it's more important. I don't know. Just finally, very briefly, on the front page of today's Daily Mail, Meghan, she never goes.
She never goes away. She's got a new TV appearance coming up today with Ellen DeGeneres on a US chat show because she's got so many important things to tell us all about. It's also been revealed that she will not be, she and Harry will not be spending Christmas with the Queen.
Oh dear, what a shame. Jason, thank you so much for joining us this morning. If people want to find out more about you and Young Voices, where do they go?
I spend my whole life on Twitter, probably too much of it. Jason Reed 624, and Young Voices UK commentators are all excellent, and you should look them all up.
There we go. Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.